What if you're brand new to ProPresenter and first off, you don't know what a presentation is, and secondly, you don't know how to make one? Well, stick around. I'll show you how. Presented by Church Tech U, it's the ProPresenter Show. On today's show, your first presentation, updated. Hi and welcome again to the ProPresenter Show. This is the show where I teach all about ProPresenter. My name's Paul Allen Clifford. And before we get started, if you're brand new to ProPresenter, go ahead, tell me about it in the comments below. I'd love to meet you. Okay, so I want you to imagine that you're brand new to ProPresenter. For some of you, it's not imagining, it's actually. And maybe you found your first presentation tutorial I did before, or one of the ones that Renewed Vision did before. And the user interface looks a little different. That's what this is about. So as I'm recording this, this is ProPresenter 21.3. One thing that you need to know if you're brand new to ProPresenter is basically any tutorial that you see that says ProPresenter 7, ignore the 7. The number after that is the version number that we're dealing with. So they changed things over when they released ProPresenter 7. So ProPresenter 21 is actually 7.21, if that helps you. Anyway, so let's head over to the computer, and you'll notice that mine's already set up. What we're going to do, though, is I'm just going to import a presentation. So first thing you should know is basically libraries are where these things are stored. A playlist is where you put them in order to use them on any particular day. So each of these things here, each of these groups of slides is a presentation. So this tutorial close is a presentation. This John 3:13 through 19 is a presentation, etc. These are all presentations. If you click on the library, anything within the library is a presentation. So how do you create a new one? Well, there's a couple of ways. First off, you can click on search right here, and if it's already in there, it will be under this first icon. If it is not in there already, you need to bring it in. Now, the easiest way is to use one of these two services. This is SongSelect by CCLI, the Church Copyright Licensing International. They are not an enforcement organization, they are a licensing organization. Just as if you let your driver's license lapse and you get pulled over, it's not the DMV that's pulling you over. It is the police. They're the enforcement arm. The licensing is a totally different set of people. So CCLI is licensing, they're not enforcement. So they're just making it easier to show lyrics with copyright stuff. Another option here is this one. This is MultiTracks. I don't actually have an account to CCLI because it's for churches and I'm not a church. Well, MultiTracks, they don't care who it is, they'll sell you one, and so I do have an account for there. So you can do a search for a song here. So let's say I wanted to do a search for Revelation song. So I can select it. You'll notice that we've got various entries. When it's under MultiTracks, which, by the way, don't click on it if you don't have a MultiTracks account because it's a little fiddly to get out of it. But when it comes to MultiTracks, these are all the same songs. They're just different arrangements from different worship albums. Which worship album? Well, it actually says the artist and then the name of the album. So Passion, Let the Future Begin, Gateway Worship, Living for You, Jesus Culture, Consumed, Live, etc. So if you are using MultiTracks, just ask your worship leader, hey, which worship album is most like the arrangement that we're going to use? By the way, the other reason you would use MultiTracks is they have chord symbols that you can show on the stage screen. So CCLI, basically that will have one set of lyrics per song, but you might have multiple songs with the same title. So for example, Amazing Grace, if you do a search for Amazing Grace under CCLI, you'll find 25 different versions of Amazing Grace, but most of them are not the one that you're thinking of. Most of them are a different song that someone else thought should be called Amazing Grace, even though that's the title of a very famous hymn. So keep that in mind as you're doing a search. So that's the first thing that you should know, is you can do a search here either within ProPresenter if you already have stuff. Notice I actually have these already. Within CCLI if you don't have it, or MultiTracks if you don't have it. Each of these are a paid service, so that's one way. Let's bring in a hymn though, because one of the hymns that I have here in my list, these are things where the authors have been dead and with Jesus a good long time, so they don't need money. Or said more technically, it's in the public domain. So I'm going to bring it in that way instead. So if I go up to File and Import, and then File again, so File, Import File, then I can go get a text document that I may have saved. So in this case, let's do And Can It Be, which is by John and Charles Wesley. You might know, you've heard of the Wesleyan Church denomination, named after John Wesley, who I just mentioned. Charles was his musical brother that wrote the hymns. Anyway, so you click Import here, and this is worth some explanation. First off, parsing, I didn't know what that word meant. Not in this context. I did take Greek in seminary, so we would talk about parsing as like figuring out what person the verb was, you know, first person, second person, singular, plural, that kind of thing. What tense. Yeah, that's not what this is. Delimited by and delimiters, I never used those words before in my life, before I got to use ProPresenter. So basically this first box is saying, hey, you've given me a big mass of text, how should I divide it up? By default it will say paragraph break and 1, and if I brought that in, And Can It Be has 6 or 8 lines per paragraph, so that would not be all that helpful. Let's say my worship leader says, hey, we want to do 2 lines per slide. Well, just change line break or paragraph break to line break here and change that to 2, and that gives us 2 lines per slide. Under presentation, your highest resolution screen, just click on this and it should list all of your screens. Notice I've got a 720p screen. That's lower resolution than my 1080p screens. So I'm going to select one of those. And then theme is basically, it's a stencil that changes the font color, the font size, where the text box is located, stuff like that. So you can click this little drop down and see if you've got any themes here. Just for fun, let me select this theme just because that's going to make it look a little bit better. Library, this is where it's going to be stored, so select the appropriate one. You might just have default, or you might have various ones. Since this is a hymn, I'll do hymns. And then playlist, I'm going to put that into the playlist that we have selected over here. It's not currently selected, but it was earlier. Now it's probably going to squawk at me a little bit because I've already brought this in, so I'm just going to click import, And see, it did. It says, hey, you've already brought this in. So if you run into that, that means you've already brought it in. Now, it could be that you want to create a new version of it. You want to use the existing one or write over it with the new one. Whatever. If you're doing more than one, you might want to select apply to all. I'm just going to select new version just so that it'll give me a new one. Okay, and that's down here. Notice that we have 2 lines per slide. I know that that's a little hard to read. I do have a slider right here that I can slide to make the slide thumbnails a little bit bigger. Here, let me click on something just to make it a little bit better. I can also, by the way, click on the text button right here and use the arrow key just to make it a little bit bigger. Now, ideally, I would have done that with the theme. So it is my fault that I selected a theme that the text was a little small. But let's say in every other way that looks good. Okay, so that's a presentation. You'll notice it has these letters. Those are hotkeys. So they enable you to jump directly to that slide. A, S, D, F, G, and H are verses 1 through 6. For bridges, bridge 1 is B, bridge 2 is N, bridge 3 is M, and for choruses, it's C for chorus, and then go to the left instead of the right like we did for all the others, and chorus 2 is X and chorus 3 is Z. Unless you're from the rest of the English-speaking world, in which case it's Z, because we're just odd here in America. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of your first presentation. Switching between slides, I tell people next to last syllable is a good guideline, but practice with the band and see if you need to switch a little earlier or a little later, depending on the speed of the song. That's important as well. You can always type in the number of the slide and enter or return, and it'll hop there. So like 11, enter, hops to slide 11, 20, enter, hops to slide 20, 1, enter, or return, hops to slide 1. So that's basically the basics of a presentation, your first one. If you know all of that, you can click on each slide if it is in order. You can also hit the space bar, by the way, and that'll take you to the next slide. Left arrow will take you back a slide. Right arrow will take you to the next one, just like the space bar. So that's actually, if you can get that down, that's probably like 95% of running ProPresenter right there. Bringing in a presentation, navigating between the slides, and that's it. But there is more to it. There's more when we come to adding media, when it comes to editing slides, etc. So, if you'd like what we talked about today, just as a quick start guide, like your first presentation cheat sheet, I got you covered. So head on over to tdm.fyi/pro-gifts, and that's spelled GIFTS if you happen not to be looking at the screen. And then look for your first presentation guide or first presentation cheat sheet. I haven't made it yet, so I don't know what it's called. And then click on that, give me your name and email address, and I will send that to you automatically. Until next time, this is Paul Allen Clifford from TrinityDigitalMedia.com and ChurchTechU.com, reminding you to go out and change eternity.